In the last lecture, we started talking about the differences between the three types of muscle tissue that is found in a human organism, right? And there's skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. And we talked about the functional and also the structural differences between these types of muscle. And it makes total sense. They have different jobs, right? So that's the one thing that I hope that you've had impressed upon you throughout this class is that form and function go hand in hand. If it looks like it does it, it probably does it, right? So if something has a job, structurally, it has to be built to do that job. Skeletal muscle has the job of moving the human body around. This is muscle that is attached to the bone, and this is muscle that when it contracts, it makes the organism move, right? So humans rely on skeletal muscle for movement. Smooth muscle, on the other hand, is used for moving things, right? So skeletal muscle is movement of the body. Smooth muscle usually is moving of blood or moving of food, or, we're talking about very weak but sustained contractions of the intestines pushing food through, of the blood vessels, preventing blood flow going from some areas, pushing blood flow to another area. So smooth muscle is really what makes up your organs, your blood vessels, and things like that. And then finally, cardiac muscle is specialized because it is your heart muscle. And the heart muscle has a ridiculously important and a difficult job to do. It needs to push blood through your blood vessels, and let's not take for granted the amount of force needed to do that. You may not think of your muscle, heart muscle, as being one of the stronger muscles in your body, but the amount of force at which blood has to be pushed out of the heart to be able to go down to your feet and back up again. Because remember, gravity is tough to get by, and there's no heart in your feet. So this needs to be enough force to push blood through your entire system. And not only does it have to do that, it has to do it tirelessly, where it's able to continuously contract over time for your entire life. So let's jump back in and finish up the differences between these three types of muscle. The last thing I talked about was this idea of how does it contract, right? So nerve impulses make skeletal muscles contract. Smooth muscle can actually stimulate itself in a process called peristalsis, and cardiac muscle also stimulates itself and actually displays a rhythmicity of your heartbeat, right? So let's pick up there and keep going. Another difference between these muscles, and this is one that doesn't make a ton of sense in terms of why does it exist. One of the things that I love about anatomy is that there's always a why, right? Except for some instances, and this is one of those instances. We don't know why this is the case, but in your skeletal muscle and your cardiac muscle, troponin is the protein at which calcium attaches and moves tropomyosin out of the way. In smooth muscle, it's a different protein. There's no troponin in smooth muscle. It's a different protein called calmodulin. It does the same exact thing. It's attached to tropomyosin, and calcium attaches to it. And when calcium attaches to it, it pulls the tropomyosin out of the way, which causes the muscle to contract. So I have never been able to find a good answer as to why. What's the difference there? Why does smooth muscle have this different protein as opposed to troponin? Just need to know that it does. Next thing is hormones. Hormones are the metabolic on and off switches of the human body. Your hormones are think of them as the on-off switches. They turn your glands on. They turn your glands off. They make growth start. They make growth stop. So your hormones are the on-off switches. And hormones can sometimes affect muscle function. They do not affect skeletal muscle, and that's important. Perfect example is fight or flight, right? Adrenaline. You're all familiar with adrenaline. You've all felt adrenaline before. If I suddenly started yelling at you right now, your heart rate would go up. Your blood vessels would dilate. Your eyes would dilate. You'd start to sweat. You would go into what is called the fight or flight reflex. And that is a perfect example of how hormones impact your skeletal system. Hormones do not impact your skeletal muscle because you want to control those. You want to be able to move. You want to have actual control over your ability to see a threat and get out of there. So your skeletal muscles do not get affected by hormones. Your smooth muscle and your cardiac muscle do. So when adrenaline gets released in your blood vessels from your adrenal glands, also called epinephrine, that causes your heart rate to go up, right? So that's hormones affecting your heart muscle. It also causes your blood vessels to dilate, to push blood to your muscles and away from your digestive tract and to your skin to allow you to cool down so you don't overheat while you're running or fighting. So hormones do not affect skeletal muscle, but they do affect smooth and cardiac muscle. The next thing on this list is how strong and how quickly do these muscles contract and relax. So skeletal muscle is built to contract and relax quickly. Your skeletal muscle is all about control and movement. You need to be able to execute some pretty involved movements if you're going to survive. So our skeletal muscle is really good at turning on and turning off quickly, right? Smooth muscle, on the other hand, is a much slower contraction. It takes a longer time to contract and relax. However, it can hold that contraction for longer. So imagine your smooth muscle causing your blood vessels to constrict, right? It's not a strong contraction, it's a weak contraction, but it can hold that contraction for much longer. And then your cardiac muscle, on the other hand, that contracts and relaxes at a certain rate. We talked about that before, your heart rate. Everybody here has a different heart rate, 60 to 80 beats per minute, right? And that is done at a certain rhythm. If you have what's called an arrhythmia, that would be like a heart murmur, where your heart beats out of rhythm. Sometimes it's completely harmless, and sometimes it's deadly. And sometimes you might need to get something called a pacemaker, which is used to regulate the rhythm when your natural rhythm is not functioning correctly. And then finally is stretching. Okay, so skeletal muscle is not affected by stretching. You can stretch your muscle all the way out and still contract it. There's no point in that process in which your muscle will not function. It might be a little weaker at the end of the movement because, you know, those heads have to hang on there, and the farther you move that muscle, the harder they're hanging on. But they don't get affected by stretching. Smooth muscle, on the other hand, does. Contractile stretch. So, for example, your stomach. When your stomach stretches, that triggers the muscles in your stomach to squeeze and push the food out into your intestines, right? So some fibers may stimulate contraction when we're talking about smooth muscle. And cardiac muscle, on the other hand, this is important. You do not want your cardiac muscle to go into tetany, right? So tetany is a sustained contraction. I'm holding this pen right now. That is tetany. That is when the contractions get so close together that you get one sustained contraction. You do not want your heart muscle to ever have a sustained contraction. That is a heart attack. That means your muscles of your heart lock up, and if your heart's not beating, you're not pushing blood out with oxygen. So heart muscle has a very long refractory period, and that prevents you from being able to go into tetany. So refractory period, again, is that time after a contraction when a muscle cannot contract. In heart muscle, that is a long refractory period, so you cannot have a situation where you have tetany occur. So just know that cardiac muscle can never go into tetany. If it did, that would be devastating. And the last thing we need to do for this section is fast twitch versus slow twitch muscle fibers. And I'm going to finish up with this, and in class I'm going to show you a video clip that explains it a little bit better, but let's just run through this now. You're all aware probably that there is light meat and there's dark meat. If you've ever bought chicken before, if you've ever gone to a chicken, fried chicken place or made a chicken, they ask you, do you want white meat or dark meat, right? White meat is made up of fast twitch fibers, and the dark meat is made up of slow twitch fibers. So let's talk about the difference there. Some of you might be runners, right? Or athletes. And you might be better at sprinting, and some of you might be better at long distance running. Well, the reason why is because there are two types of muscle fibers that exist. There are two types of muscle. Every single muscle in your body has both. But some muscles have more fast twitch and some muscles have more slow twitch. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between them. A fast twitch muscle fiber is built to be able to contract quickly and fiercely, but it can't hold that contraction very long. So we're talking about a quick reaction. So somebody who is a sprinter probably has more fast twitch fibers. Now you can do genetic testing and you can find out. It turns out I have more fast twitch fibers, which makes total sense. That's the kind of exercise I like to do. I like interval training, where I'm pushing really hard for 2 minutes and then I take a break, and then I push really hard for 2 minutes. And that's a type of workout, right? Slow twitch fibers, on the other hand, those are built for sustained longer contractions. So it's going to contract a little bit slower, but you're going to be able to sustain that contraction. So for example, someone who's a long distance runner, those muscles can just perform for much longer. And the difference is the type of fiber. So I'm going to quickly run through those, and then we're going to talk about this more in class. So let's start with a fast twitch first. A fast twitch fiber is what we consider to be our white meat. Okay, that's the white muscle. It's lighter in color. It's not as red. And here's why. For one thing, it has less mitochondria. Less mitochondria means more space for muscle fibers. However, you're going to rely on more anaerobic respiration. So we're talking about lactic acid buildup. That is why you can't sprint for that long. You can sprint, even the best sprinters in the world can only sprint a certain distance and then they run out of energy. That's because these muscle fibers aren't built for sustained movement. They are built for fast energy. So you're going to end up with less mitochondria in there. And that's why that muscle is lighter in color. Mitochondria is dark, and that's what makes the white meat white, right? Less myoglobin. So you're going to have less myoglobin because you don't need as much oxygen, because these muscles, again, are built for quick action. You're going to have more anaerobic respiration happening. So these muscles are going to be able to react quickly, but you're not going to be able to sustain that contraction. So where are you going to see this type of muscle? In smaller fibers. So for example, your eyes, your hands. If you've ever written for a long time, you know your hand tires out very quickly. It doesn't take much for those muscles to get sore. That's because they're not built to last a long time. They're built to be able to move quickly because that's what you want to survive, essentially. So your fast twitch fibers are going to be lighter in color. They're going to be the white meat. They're going to have less mitochondria, less myoglobin. They're going to go through more anaerobic respiration, and they're going to be made up of smaller muscles that are for quicker movement. Your slow twitch fibers, on the other hand, these are built for sustained contraction. So where are you going to see these? You're going to see these in your back muscles, your leg muscles, the muscles that need to hold you upright, the big muscles that are built for sustained contraction. And what allows them to do that? Well, they have more mitochondria. More mitochondria means more energy, and they can sustain a contraction for much longer. More myoglobin means more oxygen, which also means redder in color. So your slow twitch fibers are going to be red or darker because they have more mitochondria, which makes them darker in color, and also they have more myoglobin, which makes them red. These are going to be muscles that are built for longer sustained contraction. So if you have a genetic test done and you find out that your muscles have more slow twitch fibers, you're probably going to be more inclined to do the kind of exercise like a marathon or a long distance running, because your body's more built for it. You can sustain a contraction. Where if you have more fast twitch fibers, you're going to be much more inclined to run. So I'm going to finish this lecture up with a simple question. Why do chickens not have, like if you've ever had chicken before or a duck breast meat, the meat of the breast, which is what they use to fly, right? Why do chickens have white meat for that and ducks have dark meat? Why do ducks have like red dark meat for their breast meat where chickens have white meat? Well, it's a simple answer. Chickens can't fly, right? Chickens don't fly. They are bred, we breed them, they run around. So they don't need to sustain flight. Ducks fly, any bird that migrates needs to have sustained contraction. So geese, duck, any bird like that is going to have dark meat for its breast meat, and then birds that don't fly are going to have white meat because they don't need to have that sustained contraction. Thank you very much.